The accounting firm that has worked with the Trump Organization for years is cutting ties and says it can no longer stand behind a decade of financial statements from the former president's company. In a letter released as part of a disclosure from New York Attorney General Letitia James' civil investigation into the Trump Organization, Mazars USA said the work they did from 2011 to 2020 should not be relied on. A spokesperson for the Trump Organization released a statement that read in part, Mazars' work was performed in accordance with all applicable accounting standards and principles, and that such statements of financial condition do not contain any material discrepancies. This confirmation effectively renders the investigations by the DA and AG moot. Joining me now, NBC News investigations correspondent Tom Winter and former U.S. Attorney and NBC News legal analyst Joyce Vance. Tom, how big a deal, how unusual is this letter?
Well, it's quite unusual, and experts that we've spoken with, people that have worked, used to head up SEC-type investigations, regulators, my colleague Gretchen Morgensen talking to several of them yesterday, and in talking with them, they said, look, this is highly unusual, and if the Trump Organization was a public company, a Google, a GM, I'm just picking random companies out of the air, and somebody filed this, you'd be looking at stocks that were down 50, 60, 80% this morning, so it's significant in that it says, look, the information that, and this pertains directly to the former president's financial health and his financial picture, the information that's been represented over the last 10 years effectively, you can't rely upon that information. So
let me just stop you for a second, because I think a question a lot of people have had and that has been raised repeatedly about the Trump Organization and Donald Trump himself is whether or not his net worth, the value of his company was real. Is that what this kind of applies to?
Right. So these are the statements of the financial conditions of Donald J. Trump. It's not even just the Trump Organization, it's the former president himself. So one of the things that might happen is the president may say, look, I want to open up a new golf course, or I want to buy this building, or I want to renovate this property. And they would go to a bank. And since so much of the Trump Organization is in reality Donald Trump, he would have to put forward his own personal financial condition, which you or I might be do if we were to take out a loan to, say, buy a house or buy a car. How much do we owe? How much do we have? What's our cash on hand? It's obviously much more complex when you look at an organization the size of the Trump Organization and somebody like the former president. So this is something that they need to present. That is what gets us kind of to our second point here, which is that for the Trump Organization and the former president personally going forward, they're going to need a new accountant, and they're going to have to go through the books and come up with their own financial assessment. So that could be potentially an issue for the former president. The other issue potentially here is that the companies or the institutions or the individuals that hold the loans involving the Trump Organization and the former president, there might be covenants in those loans that could say, look, if you say that we can't rely upon the financial information and we find out something different, we can call those loans. They might be able to change the terms of those loans, including increasing the interest rate. So time will tell how that all bears out, all that plays out. But that's what makes this so significant.
So, Joyce, then let me go to the Trump Org statement, which is that this confirmation effectively renders the investigation by the DA and the AG moot. Does it?
It absolutely doesn't, Chris. And one of the intriguing issues here is how did New York's Attorney General come into possession of this letter, which was sent from Trump's accountant to the Trump Organization? She's not CC'd on the letter. You know, your accounting firm doesn't typically send business correspondence to the Attorney General in your state. So there's a suggestion here that Mazars is engaged with the New York Attorney General. This whole issue came up because Letitia James is trying to take the depositions of Donald Trump Jr., and Ivanka Trump. And she's being forced to justify her decision to take those depositions by the Trump folks in the course of that litigation. So this document has come out now, details of other transactions that are highly questionable and that may be sharp business practices or that may be fraud come out. But the impact of all of this is that Tish James is very likely to get her depositions. And she, of course, has jurisdiction under New York's Martin Act to protect New York from sharp business practices. She has the authority to curtail businesses' ability to operate. And even as she did with Trump's charitable fund, to no longer permit them to operate in the state of New York. So the consequences here